Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I provide an array of services, information resources, and so on at MedComms for people who work across the global community in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and the associated businesses. And one of the things we do is we provide lots of information for people who are interested in joining our business. Maybe you want to come in as a medical writer or editor or account manager or whatever. If you look at firstmedcommsjob.com, you'll find lots of resources. And we do lots of webinars and video type content. You'll find at NetworkPharma TV, there's nearly 500 videos now of all sorts of content, which is providing lots of resource for you. So go and have a look. I'm having a bit of fun at the moment, just talking to people across the business about their stories. How did they get into MedComms and what are they doing? So today we're joined by Phil from Fishawack. Phil, just fill us in. Who are you and where are you at the moment?
Hi, Peter. Yeah, so thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk about myself here and talk my part in MedComms. So I'm Phillip Chapman. I'm an Associate Scientific Director, currently working for Fishawack Health.
Excellent. And just give us a couple of minutes on Fishawack. Just for anyone who doesn't know Fishawack, just give us a little bit of a description of the business and how far it reaches.
Sure. So Fishawack Health is it's like a multinational sort of all service sort of MedComms agency. So by that I mean that they offer sort of a wide range of services across the medical communication sphere. So one of the things is medical education, which I'm involved in, and that's your scientific literature, your medical publishing, and some medical affairs, educational materials. We also offer like consultancy services and cut this out.
An array of services. And just to make the point, I won't test you on quite where the offices are, but there's offices across the globe, aren't there? You're quite a large multinational, as you say.
Yes, we're based across the US, both West Coast, East Coast. There's a number, I think 4 or 5 offices in the UK. We're based in Europe as well, and we have affiliate agencies in Asia.
Excellent. And just to clarify, you're talking to us from the UK. You're affiliated to the Abingdon office, is that right?
Yeah, Abingdon, so just south of Oxford, so yeah, UK based.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's go back to let's look at the personal journey, which is what I'm interested in. Tell us, where did you start? How did you get into MedComms, I guess? So where were you at uni? How did you get your first job? How did you get into MedComms? Talk us through the journey.
Yeah, so from uni, went to university in Austin. I studied human genetics and did a BSc there. And then I felt, after university, I felt like I needed to I wanted to get into the working world, and I was always keen on the medical science. I wanted to communicate that, but didn't really know much about MedComms or medical communications. Was something that wasn't really talked about with my university lecturers, or didn't know anyone going into it. So I felt, for me, I wanted to go down to communicate science, was to go into scientific publishing, medical journal publishing. So following uni, after a year out of doing a bit of traveling, I got a job with the Future Science Group, who do might heard like Future Medicine, or used to do the expert review series of journals. So I worked on the production editing side of that. So I was very much involved in bringing in the articles that are submitted by the academics and by medical communications agencies, making sure that everything was accurate, typesetting it, getting it laid out with the right style, sending off the page proofs to the authors, making sure that they're all happy, and making sure it's all published and displayed on the website and through the traditional print media. And I did that for about 8 years. So I can work my way up from an assistant editor to more of a managing editor, being responsible for a number of journals and ebooks that were being published at the time. But I found over the time, I thought I'd be able to really get involved in the communication of science, but obviously in the journal publishing, especially on the production side, we're very much taking the articles that have been developed by the authors and then processing it and then getting it out and displaying it, making sure that it's widely available and that it can be communicated in the right channel so that we can communicate the science. But I felt that I wasn't really ever getting that close to the actual scientific data, to the medical literature as such, and felt that I wanted to go back to being a bit more involved with the data and the actual creation of the materials and the development of that. So after knowing a few friends who went from publishing to MedComms, I started to look around and sort of investigate sort of like the opportunities in MedComms out there. And so I actually applied for a job with Fishawack as a medical editor. So obviously, coming from like the production editor side and publishing, I felt like a medical editor role in MedComms would be a good sort of way into sort of like the industry, and sort of be a good route for me to use the skills that I built up in the publishing.
Okay. It's interesting what you say, because a lot of people say that they sort of stumble into MedComms, or they know somebody in MedComms or whatever. So hopefully what we're doing with what we do is at least, helping tell more people about MedComms. But a lot of people do come in on the basis that they know somebody, sort of thing. But it's also interesting you came into MedComms as an editor. Again, there's a tendency, I think, for people to think it's either writing or account management type positions, but the editing role is there. It's interesting you came into that. So just talk a little bit about where you've gone from coming in as an editor, because you've ended up going the medical writing route, haven't you? So just talk us through, and how has that changed in terms of the sort of work you've done?
Yeah, so obviously I joined as an editor, and I think editors are really important in terms of the writing process, because as a writer you can be very close to the material and you're very close to the data and what you're actually writing, but the editor's there with sort of like the fresher eyes. They make sure that everything's consistent, that you're doing those quality checks and making sure that it reads like sort of grammatically accurately, and it has good flow, and it sort of like it just gives it sort of that polishing to make it as professional as it can be. So they provide a really good service, and I've always enjoyed the sort of like the craft of writing and sort of making sure things are sort of done to sort of the highest sort of quality. So I was doing the editing role for a number of years at Fishawack, but there are opportunities to do some sort of like just bits of writing that came about. So sort of developing a few small slide decks, or a lot of things that I started doing were writing summaries of papers, not abstract, but like sort of short summaries to sort of explain what the papers were communicating. And that kind of gave me a taste of the writing, and allowed me to sort of demonstrate like the sort of aptitude that I felt that I had for writing. So eventually, after doing that a bit, I decided to like chance my hand and have a go at the actual writing side. So then I transitioned within Fishawack from editor to a writer, and worked on a traditional publications account, so very much working on abstracts, posters, and like primary papers or review articles, and sort of helping sort of develop the writing of those. And then, yes, I've been doing the writing side for about 6.5 years now, I'll say 6.5 years. And so, worked my way through sort of like the traditional route. So sort of started as a medical writer, then progressed to sort of senior medical writer. And then in Fishawack, you can go down a couple of paths, so those routes for people who want to get more involved in sort of like the day-to-day management of like the accounts that we work on, and sort of working quite closely with the clients. Or there's what we call a bit more of a scientific route, where you get more involved in sort of like the scientific strategy of like the publications, and get like more hands-on with the actual like data and the development of the project. So I went down that route and became a principal medical writer, and now as associate scientific director.
With a team of people working for you,
so
writers, is it a team of writers that you have?
Yeah, so we have a team. So it's a wide team. So we have a team of writers who were responsible for the day-to-day sort of like producing materials. We also got editors who are aligned to the accounts, and there's like project managers and account managers, client service. So a wide team to provide like the full support. And actually, I've recently transitioned sort of away from sort of more of the account role and the team role, and actually working now in more of a mentorship sort of training role. So with new writers who are coming into the company, obviously there's a lot of things that like we almost take for granted when we've been sort of experienced in medical writing, but someone new coming in won't know all the terminology or the appropriate ways, or the things that are needed, the requirements that are in terms of scientific writing. And so now I'm involved with sort of like training up the new medical writers to get them up to speed, develop their writing skills in the company.
Okay, so let me just I'm going to make a point, but let's come back, because that's interesting. You're involved in bringing people in and mentoring the new writers on. So we'll come back and focusing on that a little bit second. I just wanted to, I suppose, stress that point that you touched on. The editorial role is an important one. The editing role is an important one, and it does offer a useful way into the business for people. And we're all about the accuracy of information. It can be very, very important in a monograph to make sure the full stop is in the right place, sort of thing. Yeah. But one of the points that I would be saying to people who don't know much about our business is different agencies work in different ways. So in some companies, it's very much writers editing each other's work. In other companies like yours, you have editors specializing in editing. And it's just one of the things that people can think about and maybe look out for when they're talking to different agencies and so on. But come back to mentoring the new writers coming in there. So come on, let's have a couple of minutes just talking about the sorts of, what do you see as people come into the business as an entry-level medical writer? Let's just focus on that then. What are their challenges that they're facing? Do they see this as, is it such a culture shock? They come from academia. I guess most of your new medical writers coming from academia. So, what's the culture shock like, and how do you manage and support them? See what I mean?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, there's we know MedComms can be quite fast paced, and there's can be thrown with quite a lot of terminology as we discuss things. Sort of obviously, you talk about outlines, or you talk about response to a reviewer, or you talk about abstracts, and even posters. And sometimes we assume that level of knowledge that people may not necessarily have, and say, "Oh, here's an outline that I need you to develop," and that'll be briefed, and the new writer may not fully know exactly what needs to go in an outline, what level of detail you need to put into an outline compared to a first draft or later stages. So in my role now, with the new recruit, we kind of take that time to give them just an hour or a couple of hours to fully brief them, make sure they fully understand what the requirements are of the particular writing task that they're going to be doing, and then make sure they're very happy, to give them a chance to sort of ask any questions about the data, where best to find it, because as you can work with sort of study reports, and sometimes digging through that and trying to find out the relevant data that needs to be pulled out can be a bit difficult when you first start, and it's something that comes with practice and experience. And so what we try and do is pass on the experience that we've gained over the number of years and sort of our role, and pass on to them so they can sort of hit the ground running a little bit more quickly. And then as we go through the review, it gives us more time to sort of really sit down and get into the review and explain the rationale for why we're making the sort of suggestions for improvements, rather than just saying, change this because it would be better this way, or change this because this isn't how we should do it. We're trying to get behind it and actually give them the rationale so they can apply that for future writing projects, rather than just those individual projects, and really sort of helping them to think beyond just sort of writing that one piece of work there, but thinking about the writing process as a whole, always going back to what is the story that we're trying to tell here. Really try and emphasize sort of the fact that with all forms of medical writing and stuff, we're always looking at what is the current issue that we're looking at, how does the current study that we're reporting address that issue, and what are these sort of the clinical implications, what are the treatment implications that may come out from our results, and just trying to reaffirm that so that the writers are really getting a clear picture of how they should be sort of planning out their writing.
But pushing a little bit more in terms of that new, I'm trying to get that new fresh-faced medical writer coming in through the doors. What I just wonder what do you think the immediate sort of reaction is? What are they seeing as the challenges? I'm going to put words in your mouth if I'm not careful, but you're in a commercial environment now. You've got timesheets to worry about. You've got your multidisciplinary team, things like that. Is this the sort of thing that people just go, oh gosh, and then settle into, or are there anything else? What would if you were talking to someone coming into the business, what would you be saying be prepared for? See what I mean?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. So I think one of the things that we do find people do is that prioritization, and sort of having multiple projects. And so you'll be getting, some weeks you'll be getting an abstract to develop, and then you have some comment incorporation on manuscript that's come back from from review by the authors, and then there may be a peer review response, and actually trying to work out which order to prioritize, how you sort of go about sort of balancing when do you start work, who it needs to go to next, and sort of balancing all those different deadlines can be quite overwhelming for people when they're first coming in and maybe used to working on just one or two projects at a time. So we kind of help them sort of like balance that and sort of get that understanding of the prioritization. And then I think as well as just the level of sort of like compliance that needs to be done, especially with manuscripts, and making sure that things are all done in a compliant way, that we're adhering to sort of like good publication practices, and like making sure that authors meet like ICMJ criteria and stuff. There's lots of things that unless you're involved in these sort of like the publications from day to day, that you're not necessarily aware of, but these are all really important things that have been brought into the industry for a reason. And so we're there to sort of help guide them so they can understand that what they're doing is sort of like being made sort of the reason for doing it is to make sure that things are compliant, they understand those sort of compliant needs.
And just, we're going to wrap up. I have to wrap up because we're running out of time. But just out of interest, you've been in the business for a few years. Simply, how have you seen it change? How have you seen it change? Working practices have changed. Digitization's coming in. Have you got any sort of just quick thoughts on how things are changing at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think the traditional publishing is always going to be like your bread and butter, and that's going to be sort of staying the same. But we do see now there's a lot more push for video abstracts or like enhanced publication content where you do graphical abstracts and stuff to really sort of add those sort of bells and whistles to publication. So It's not just doing sort of like a main traditional publication, but there are going to be other opportunities to get more involved in some more creative writing aspects on publication accounts. I find as well with medical education in general, a lot of it's becoming a lot more personalized. They're thinking much more about personas, who you're targeting, and adjusting sort of the way you're sort of communicating your data or the findings or results for the target audience. And they're really thinking sort of more strongly in that, and sort of coming up with those kind of sort of persona aspects that
Okay, and so, I mean, is it fair to more interesting? It's more creative, much wider scope for people to do much more than just. I mean, one of the things with medical writers is I think there's still lots of people who think they're coming into a business where they sit at the desk and they write something, and the medical writer's role, as you're touching on, is much broader than that, isn't it? And if anything, MedComms is becoming more and more broad, and there's more variety in there, and more creativity is coming into it, and so on.
Yeah, it's becoming a lot more like they're really using the advantages of the digital projects and things. It's not just you're not just going to be sitting there doing sort of like writing abstract writing, like just your traditional like paper. You're going to have opportunities to be involved in lots of different sort of aspects and creative opportunities.
Great. Okay. So look, we do need to wrap it up. But so basically, the message is great career to get into.
Yeah, I love it. It's really good. Really, excellent. You're never going to be bored.
Excellent. That's it. Okay. Well, on that positive note, thanks ever so much, Phil, for jumping online with me. If anyone's watching this, listening to this, please, I know you're very happy for people to reach out to you on LinkedIn. That's an easy way of doing it. And part of the point of this is to help people connect. If anyone's interested in what I'm doing, MedComsNetworking.com, or give me a shout directly, no problem at all. But for today, thank you so much, Phil, for joining in, and take care. Give us a little wave and say goodbye. Bye-bye.